probably know what I'm talking about, but that initial shock of what happens, where you kind of have that disbelief. You know, it's like, you're like, what's going on? And I remember, I don't know how long it went, but I remember that feeling of just silence, you know, where it's like, you kind of almost feel like, am I giving up right now? Like, is this it? You know, so I remember having that feeling that like, okay, I need to start talking. Like, I'm in charge of this thing, I'm the captain, so I need to start talking. We need to start figuring out what on earth we're gonna do to get this thing to work, get out of this. So I remember thinking, like, just start saying something. So I said, all right, David, we need to find a way to clear the smoke. This is the first thing we gotta do, because that's gonna get us before the aircraft gets us, you know? So 139 has, you can actually see it, that little window right there, the pass-through window. So I opened mine, and I was breathing out of that while staying on the controls, like take a breath and kind of look at things as much as I could. That opening those little windows on both sides didn't do anything. Obviously we were going 100, we fly at cruising 150 true in this thing, so the opening doors wasn't gonna happen. And there was no slowing down, which I'll get to in greater detail in a little bit. So can't open the doors, can't open the windows, cockpit's still filling with smoke. My co-pilot, God bless him, awesome decision, and to have the forethought to do it. He actually took his window and snapped it in half and pulled it in. So with that little gap on my side and then his window snapped in half, that actually immediately now sucked all the smoke out. So it was like, okay, we got through that, and now we're still flying. So it's like, all right, here we go. So now we're looking at, you know, looking at the pieces of what's going on, right? So we cleared the smoke out. We were at 4,500 feet. This all happened at 3,000 feet. Now, this is the interesting thing. Now, we are climbing at close to 2,000 feet a minute with the collective fold down. And what I'm looking at on both engines pushing out 140% torque on each side. So I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? Because again, collective is full down, nose is level. NR did recover up to 100%, but now, like I said, 140% on both sides. This thing cruises, you know, these the power index, kind of like the FLI or the PSI, right? So this thing cruises at around 75% on each side. Just as a comparison, takeoff power max is 110. So we're pushing 140. So here we go, we're climbing like a rocket. We basically went from 3,000 up to almost 7,000 feet. And I remember telling David, I was like, dude, can you please verify, is my collective down? He's like, yeah, man, it's against the stop. Like, there's no other play in it. So I'm just, you sit there and it's like, what do you do with this? The aircraft's climbing like a rocket, everything's over torquing over everything. You got a laundry list of caution messages that you can't even begin to even start to think about going through. So you know something's wrong, you don't know what's wrong. So now we get up to about 7,000 feet. And by the way, this is an interesting thing. So VNE obviously decreases with altitude. So we were doing about 160 indicated once we finally got it straight and level, holding it that way. And I'm trying to figure out how are we going to descend. And that's, yeah, so now it goes from here. So here we are at 7,000 feet, all the parameters I just talked to you about. Now we're over the airport. Basically, we got, like, we're almost there. Now I remember at some point looking down and being like, there's Homa. There's where I'm trying to go. How am I going to get from here to there to get this thing on the ground? So we tried, okay, because we had so much power going into the aircraft from both engines. I remember thinking, well, we need to try something. We need to reduce the power and stress going into this airframe because I'm honestly thinking it's going to come apart. Because I'm like, how long can this thing take it, right? I mean, now we're off in experimental land. It's like, we don't know. We're well beyond every published limit you could possibly think of in this thing. So, at this point, I got the gear down. I told David, I was like, okay, let's just try bringing engine number 1 to idle. Let's just see what will happen, like just try and take things incrementally. He brings engine 1 to idle. This is up at about, 6,000 feet. That RPM goes from 100 down to about 82 in that fast, like in a second. And it was, so now I'm screaming at him, not because of him, but just the situation to bring it back, you know, just get that engine back up. So he does, and it spools up. So now we're like, well, that almost killed us. And it's worth mentioning right now, like that, sorry, it's just one of those things. That feeling of knowing you're gonna die, for those of you who have been there, it's pretty awful. I say this because it's going to come into the end of this discussion. There's some things I wish I would have done, you know, talking to people and things like that, because, I don't know, we're all human, and you think everything's going to be fine, but there were several times where it's like, okay, this is it. This is the end of my life. I'm going to crash in this marsh down there in the middle of Louisiana, flying offshore oil, and this is going to be into Steve. Like, it went through the head a number of times. So that was kind of the first time where I remember having that thought. So anyway, engine's been brought to idle, RPM almost goes out, rotor almost stalls, bring it back to flight. So now we realize that the only thing we're going to be able to do is literally nose this thing over and just descend with power, okay? And I don't understand where in my mind I didn't call for both engines to be cut. We'll see as we go along what would have happened if we would have done that. But I just remember thinking, take everything incrementally, don't do everything all at once. You know, we always can go to the extreme, cut both engines in auto if we have to. But, you know, let's just keep working the problem, right? So we realize we can't take the one engine down, it's at flight. We're still going 160 knots, we're up at 6,000 feet, we're over the top of the airport. I go, okay, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna nose it over. I'm gonna give it a real gradual, shallow angle of bank spiraling descent to get down to the airport. Because my thought was, I don't wanna do anything aggressive. You know, we're flying with all this maximum power applied and everything's screaming. I go, I don't wanna do anything too aggressive to where something's gonna break and come apart on us, right? So we start this spiraling right-hand descent over the airport from 6,000 feet. At this point, David got on there and he declared an emergency with the tower, so we got that rolling, and they gave us the airspace. So now, we get back down, so now we're down to 1,000 feet. Okay, I have no idea if my landing gear's down, because my indicator lights aren't indicating. We lost 1 out of 4 screens, all of our radio stuff, we went down to 1 radio. Well, I mean, everything was really jacked. Our fuel indications in there, they have, you know, indicators with lines, right, like parallel, perpendicular kind of stuff. They were all at different various angles, like for the fuel valves and everything. I mean, it had really, that electrical fire in the situation really messed things up. So, suffice to say, it was, it was difficult to tell what was going on, right? So, I couldn't tell if my landing gear was down, the lever was down, but I don't know. So, we decided we're going to fly by the tower to see if the gear was down. So, after our descent, here we go, we told them, they did verify for us. They're like, yeah, you know, mains and nose wheel are down, appears good to us. And I remember they said, good luck, you know, good luck to you guys. And we're like, thank you. So, there was something else there too that kind of goes into this whole thing. I remember on that particular pass, we wound up doing 3 passes. So it was that first one, then another attempt at landing, then the final one, and I'll cover those as I go. But on the first one, I remember telling David, I remember saying 3 times, and like the comms were so jacked and there was like static in the background the whole time. If you stopped talking, you would hear in your headset just this screaming, just like, you know, like the feedback and everything. So we had to kind of keep something going on. Otherwise it was like, you know, you're trying to think and imagine someone tapping you on the shoulder while you're trying to solve like a math problem or something, you know? So I do remember telling him 3 times that we are not going to die today. We're going to figure this out. We're not going to die today. We're going to figure this out. And I remember now, it's funny when I talk to him, he goes, I remember you saying that. And I remember thinking that's not possible, but okay, I'm with you. You know, sounds good, man. Whatever you got, I'm with you. So kudos to him. And yeah, anyway, so we flew by the tower. That conversation happened. And now we're coming back around and we're kind of figuring out what we're gonna do. Because now we're at 1,000 feet, doing about 160 knots indicated. By the way, the landing gear extended speed in the 139 is 150. So you're already blowing past that constantly. The power had gone down from 140, now down to fluctuating at about 101, I'd say like 105, like constant on both engines. And as soon as I would take any pressure off the cyclic, the aircraft would start climbing at like 700 feet a minute. Again, so it's just, we're just screaming along, 160 knots, 1,000 feet. And so we're thinking, how are we gonna land this thing? Like, we can't slow down, we can't hover, it's not reacting the way it's supposed to, you know? So we figured, like,